Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome back to the show. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great, but I bet I'm not doing as great as you are. Live from St. Augustine, it's
That
Scott
is
W. Luton, everybody.
that is right. We did take a show on the road as one side of my family takes its vacation, isolated vacation down here at the beach, Ponte Vedra. And but there's no shortage of things to talk about in the world of supply chain, which stops for no one, right, Greg?
Right, no doubt.
So
Keeps
today
on going and keeps on changing.
That's right. And so today we continue our Supply Chain Buzz series here on Supply Chain Now. You can find it every Monday at 12 noon Eastern Time. And it's all about some of the latest developments and some quick takes on why they're important and what to look for. And we'll continue that here today as our aim is to help increase your supply chain IQ, right?
Attaboy. Even from the beach, you are straight on it.
Hey, we're working hard for our audience here, whether we're on vacation or not. So, quick programming note before we get started here today. If you like our live streams, check out our podcast. Last week we launched our newest series featuring none other than Gregory Scott White and Tequila Sunrise, tequila with a TECH. And
Yes.
Greg, you've heard all around the world from that first series.
Yeah, it's been pretty impressive return. I mean, in like 3 days, we had 600 listens as a podcast. And of course, we're publishing it to other channels and that sort of thing. So got some great feedback. You're going to see the result of your feedback, particularly Mark Nolan from High Looms. Thank you. Going to see the results of your feedback in this next episode. So
Awesome.
But I'm still busting out the smooth jazz voice because I am legitimately doing this at an unholy hour of the day. So that's all the energy that I've got.
Well, it came off well received. I certainly enjoyed it. The whole team enjoyed it. We're hearing from a lot of folks, and it's different. It really stands out. It's really dedicated to supply chain tech and a lot of cool developments, and it really taps into Greg's expertise and experience. So, great show. Check it out wherever you get your podcast from. And also today we published the latest installment of This Week in Business. It's not as cool as Tequila Sunrise, but
very informative, really. It's a history lesson in business, and I think it's good. Gives a good perspective to folks as to where all this stuff came from. You started with a really exciting topic, the UPC symbol.
That's right.
And this week, what are we talking about?
We are talking about it was published today, and it's all about the birth of the U.S. interstate highway system. You know, it'd be tough to have a $700 billion trucking industry,
right?
Take or leave a dollar, without the interstate system, which really revolutionized the supply chain here in our country. And of course, we borrowed heavily from Germany, right?
Yes, right.
So there's a lot more of that story on This Week in Business History. You can check that out and all of our shows wherever you get your podcast from.
Yep.
Okay. So moving right along, real quick, before we talk about one interesting note from June 29th from the past, we want to say hello to a few folks. Stefan is back with us. Sagar is with us here on LinkedIn from India. Hello. Let's see. And Sagar, you asked about the difference between supply chain analyst and supply chain management. We'll see if we can't circle back on that note at the end of today's buzz. That's a great question. And hey, Felicia with the Reverse Logistics Association is with us as well. So great to see you, Felicia.
Always good to see Felicia.
Hopefully you and Tony and the whole team are doing well. We look forward to reconnecting soon. And finally, the mountain man himself, Don Long, who journeys up the side of Stone Mountain, seems like every Sunday now, is tuned in as well. So hello, Don. Okay, so Greg, let's take a look back. So today, I can't use my prop because I'm using it as part of this on the road version of the buzz.
I'll use mine.
Please do. All right, so you see the iPhone there in Greg's left hand, I believe. On this day, say June 29th, 2011, Apple releases its first mobile phone. So let's shed a little light on the background of that.
Yeah.
So as much as the telephone, the automotive, the PC, and numerous other inventions changed the world, the iPhone certainly changed the world when it was released in 2007 on June 29th, 2007. So at the time, Apple's only other handheld device was none other than the iPod. Do you remember those, Greg?
I do. In fact, I'll tell you a little story about how I came to be an iPhone user. But go ahead, finish your thought.
Okay, so I'm a paraphrase. I've got a quote there from Steve Jobs and that infamous rollout where he was sharing, with Apple shareholders and teammates and the whole thing, and he talked about how that one device was going to pull together the phone, the iPod, and an internet connection, internet browser, and he kept saying, "Do you get it? Do you get it?" And it was just, Steve Jobs being Steve Jobs made such a big impact. But back then in 2006, so the year before, the dominant smartphone device manufacturers were Nokia, Research in Motion. That's right, the folks behind the Crackberry, which was the BlackBerry was referred to at the time, Motorola, and get this one, Greg, I'd forgotten about this one, Palm, and the Palm Pilot. All those were big players in 2006.
Have one of those laying around also. Right? what were those things called? A PDA, right?
Personal Digital
Assistant. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
All right. So, of course, any new venture, any new initiative has plenty of skeptics, and there were two big notable skeptics related to the iPhone. Then Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer told USA Today in April 2007, quote, "There's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share," end quote.
Ever the visionary, Steve Ballmer.
Jim
Steve Ballmer should say thank you frequently to Bill Gates.
That is right. Jim Balsillie, co-CEO of Research in Motion at the time in 2007, reportedly told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "It's okay. We'll be fine," end quote. Okay. So, hey, not throwing stones at anybody. We all have to wade into and make predictions from time to time. The iPhone got the last laugh. It sold 6 million units in its first year, which is remarkable. Of course, it turned the whole industry on its head, right? Especially in its all touch screen. If you remember back in 2006, most of the leading smartphone devices had a screen at the top and physical buttons at the bottom.
Right.
The iPhone changed all that. And it would be just as world changing for the market, it was world changing for Apple because it's become essentially, maybe arguably, the flagship product and very impactful to the bottom line and something they've been able to launch and go in different areas based on the success of. So big date in history, June 29, 2007, the iPhone is launched. So Greg, you're going to tell a little anecdote about how you adopted it.
So think what you will about Steve Jobs as a person, arguably a terrible person, but a brilliant visionary. In 2005 or so, I recall having a BlackBerry because you had real-time email on the device, which meant you weren't tethered to a laptop. I had an MP3, probably an iPod. I don't even remember. Yeah, I did have an iPod. And of course, I had a phone, right? And then when BlackBerry became a phone and a mobile device, I determined that I was never a phone and email. I determined that I wasn't getting another new device until it was all in one. And just 2 years later, here it was. So his ability to understand the latent need of the consumer and cure that and fix that and solve that problem is brilliant. Yeah. He did likewise with even the Macintosh back in the 80s. And you can see exactly why Steve and Jim both didn't get it. It wasn't necessarily that they didn't get it. I poke a little fun at Steve Ballmer, but it was that they didn't want to get it. And you also see how that big companies, established leaders in the industry, this is why they can't disrupt. You got to remember that Jobs had come back to Apple and had reinvigorated their research and development and visionary capabilities. And frankly, when he was gone, they've never had the same capabilities since, right? They are now a big established company making incremental gains not disrupting an industry. So the brilliance there is amazing. Again, the ability, and I bet a lot of people felt the same way I did. I'm tired of having 3 devices. I'm not doing this again until somebody does something right.
Oh,
Enormous, and here it is. So,
yeah. And it continues. You put it well. You put it well. It continues in its 13th, 14th year, and we'll see what the next big bold product out of Apple or other smart device players will maybe turn industry on its head in the next few years. But iPhone definitely did that 13 years ago, as it was launched on June 29th, 2007. Okay, before we scan the headlines, we got a slew of folks that are weighing in. I think folks must be chomping at the bit to talk supply chain, which we love. We have Javeed from Pakistan. Hope this finds you well. I think he's tuned in via LinkedIn. Hello, Javeed. We have Memory, of course. Memory tuned in from Johannesburg, South Africa. I hope you're doing well. A supply chain practitioner there. Derek Martin, Derek in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where I believe Clay, I'm not sure how close Murfreesboro is to Maggie Valley, but we've got a team member headed that way. So hello, Derek, on LinkedIn. Thomas,
Murfreesboro is closer to Nashville, right? South and east of Nashville, if I recall.
I will trust your geography on that.
Only because I have dropped off my daughter at a birthday party there.
Okay. So there you go. All right. Thomas B. Thomas says, greetings. Enjoy your program. He's relocating from Middle Tennessee to upstate South Carolina, and he's looking for his next supply chain opportunity. So great to have you here on the program with us, Thomas, via LinkedIn, and best of luck via your move. And I'm sure you'll find no shortage of opportunities in the upstate of South Carolina, which is really—
I was going to say, that's a great stretch of road to drive if you're looking for a supply chain gig.
Absolutely. Let's see here. Vandana is tuned in via LinkedIn from India. So great to have you here as well. And gosh, we got, so I'm just going to read these off real quick. I think Clay is sharing the graphics behind the scenes, but just real quick, welcome Pierre via LinkedIn, Rob via YouTube, Kamajello from YouTube and South Africa, Joseph Valentine, hey, related, maybe a third cousin, Tom Valentine, is via LinkedIn. And I know that Joseph Valentine is a reverse logistics aficionado. So stick around, Joseph, for a story we're going to cover.
So he's working with my friends at Clarity Capital Partners. He's doing an internship this summer with Steve Keaveney, who some of you might know, has done some finance shows with us as well. So
well,
keep up the good work, Joe.
Keep up the good work. Small world, and great to have you here. Finally, Sylvia Judy is a regular here on the Buzz. Greetings from Charleston, working on South Carolina Peach Jam. Love that, Sylvia.
She must be producing that for the whole world. She was doing that last week too.
That's right. Okay, so let's dive. So welcome everybody. Really appreciate the comments and the participation. It's all about our audience, and we appreciate all the engagement. So let's kick off. So we're going to scan a couple headlines on the front end here. We're going to take a deep dive. Greg's going to lead us through a big story in the middle of the show, and then we're going to cover a couple of quick hitters from a headline standpoint towards the end of the show, and then that's going to be the Buzz today. So today, though, kicks off a really big chapter for a really big company, really important program to get back up and running, even though the sluggish demand given the overall environment. What we're talking about here is the 737 MAX and Boeing. So in this story from Reuters, Boeing 737 MAX certification flights are reportedly to begin today. So as we all know, the 737 MAX has that crisis has been made a lot worse due to the pandemic, but arguably even worse due to one of the big developments brought around by the pandemic, which is hardly any air travel, right?
Significant reduction in air travel.
Huge. And so naturally, if you're in aerospace and aviation, folks don't need nearly, if any, of your products. And what I also learned, quick sidebar, Greg, over the weekend doing a little bit of research, is that it's easier for Airbus, it's Boeing's main competitor, to make sure companies take their orders even if they don't need them. And Boeing has a lot less leverage, so the hundreds of jets on order, we'll see what happens with those. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. So this particular aircraft and the massive supply chain behind it, it's been grounded since March 2019, which came on the heels of two deadly crashes that killed 346 people. So the certification, the flight tests have been a long time coming, right? The FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, is making sure that Boeing's fixes really going to solve the problem and won't lead to some of those deadly events again. So the certification flight tests will be focused on assessing and approving Boeing's proposed changes to this automated flight control system. So as part of the testing, the test crew, which is actually made up of FAE administrators and I think pilots and experts, and of course Boeing team members,
Right.
they're going to intentionally trigger the reprogrammed stall prevention software, which is one of the key root causes. And I'm no pilot, but what I read a lot, and as we were uncovering the story and kind of the main causes behind these crashes, is you had the software that was telling that the plane was doing one thing, and the pilots were trying to basically circumvent the software and fighting it. And through the struggle, we had these two deadly crashes. So, a big important piece of this aviation system to get fixed. So, Greg, get this. Even if the 737 MAX passes this week's test, the path ahead has a lot more obstacles before they get that final green light.
Right.
So, but Greg, if let's say the green light happens, let's wipe all that time frame out. Let's say the green light happens this week even. It's probably not going to happen before September, from what I understand, if everything goes well. But let's say it happens this week. What happens? What does Boeing do?
Well, I mean, what better time, though, to be testing aircraft than right
True.
now? It's not unlike the fact that people are buying technology to fix the problems they've had caused in their supply chain right now.
Right.
They're buying and implementing it because they have the time on their hands. And certainly Boeing has made good use of this sort of downtime. But you're right. It's not, first of all, many of the orders have already been canceled. Airline flight is not, it's down 92%, which is, I mean, virtually 100.
Right.
So,
and it's not going to get better. So get this, Greg. Right. You're referring to current air travel and just how it's fallen off a cliff. The International Air Transport Association, which I believe one of my buddies told me is referred to as IATA or IATA, one or the other.
IATA. Yep.
I'm sure I'll get an email about that. It estimates that global passenger air traffic in 2021 is going to be down 25%, so 2019, if we use that as a baseline, right, before the pandemic, they're projecting 2021 is going to be 25% down what 2019 was. So not just we see a heavy fall off now of air traffic, but we're projecting that to stick around for quite some time.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for Boeing and Airbus and everyone else involved in aerospace? Well, not only is there not a big demand for new aircraft, but it's been said that the current inventory that these airlines already have, they've got too many aircraft in their current inventory.
Yep.
So,
because orders were canceled while product was in production, which apparently in some contracts you have the right to do, and there's sort of a buyout of the contract for doing that.
That's right.
So,
and this is, for those that may, they may be hitting the supply chain buzz and maybe, why are we tackling aviation? Well, it's really important. Boeing and these new programs are hugely important to the U.S. economy. I'd say the global economy, based on just how everything's connected these days. And as we tackled a couple months back, Greg, a lot of economic analysts were projecting GDP growth or lack thereof. One of the main factors was if Boeing was going to get things back moving again because of this massive global supply chain, all the thousands of suppliers. And these are really important programs. So hopefully, we all hope that Boeing gets good news this week. Most importantly, to protect the passengers, but certainly for some economic reasons as well, right?
Look, the lesson here is do it right the first time. I mean, based on the reports that I've read, they cut corners on this technology, and that was one of the impacts to it. I'd love to hear from somebody if they know more details, but you can see when you go back through the analysis of this process that they clearly didn't put enough diligence into it, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of whether they quote unquote cut corners, if they had put enough diligence into it, there wouldn't have been the problems that they had, and they wouldn't have been as pervasive as they could be. This is a great lesson to anyone in any business, but certainly in supply chain, is think about the worst case scenario.
I want to do this
that as well.
So my apologies. I think I've got a little bit of a lag on my end, Greg. So I didn't mean to step on your toes there. Y'all got me? You've got me good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right. Hey,
is
real
that
quick.
The ocean I hear in the background, by the way?
Maybe. Oh boy, if anyone could see this this contraption I've got set up for this live stream, it'd be funny. But hey, real quick, Clay, if we could share, I want to share Stephen's and Pierre's comments here. Stephen makes a great point. Stephen, sorry. If you could share Stephen's point about investing in a time of turmoil will certainly have a positive effect on Boeing, even though the reputation recovery will take significantly longer. That's a great point, Stephen. Yeah. Great point. So thanks for contributing that. And of course, thanks for being here. Also, Pierre shares contractually, it would be interesting to know how many 737 MAX airplanes are obligated versus new orders. That's another great question. I wish I had an answer for that.
I'm sure there is something out there that addresses that, because I know that months and months ago, the initial discussion was around the cancellation of a lot of those orders.
Yep. And let's also share. Hope White is with us here today. Hope White via LinkedIn. Hope, I might get this wrong, but I believe you and Greg were part of the Procurement Foundry events last week. So I missed your session, but great to have you here on the Buzz on LinkedIn.
CEO, so it proves we can pull the heavy hitters, right?
That is right.
Everybody, of course, but yeah, it was great. That was a great session. By the way, if you're in procurement, the sessions were recorded, so you can go back to the Slack channel and check that out.
Yep.
A lot of the people that we see here in the feed were there.
Outstanding. And Greg hit a home run as usual from what I have heard. And I wouldn't expect anything less, Greg.
Well,
you're our Cecil Fielder.
I was simply a moderator, and Joe Main from Papa John's and Paul Emmer from Edible Arrangements talked a lot about last mile delivery, and who has been doing last mile delivery longer than pizza? If you think about it, right? I mean, and Joe started out with Pizza Hut, so he's been doing it a long time, even by pizza standards. So there's a lot of really valuable information there.
Yeah. Okay, so moving right along, our second quick headline we're going to hit before we take a deep dive on retail. Let's talk about Foxconn and some of the sourcing moves that have already been in motion. They're just going to be amplified a bit. So as we all know, tensions continue to simmer between the U.S. and China on a number of fronts, certainly to include trade and technology concerns. Foxconn is the world's largest contract manufacturer. It's actually based in Taiwan, and it's looking for ways to mitigate the risk that these tensions pose to its supply chain, as a lot of companies are trying to figure that out, right? While investing in growth opportunities. So protect current business while continuing to invest in what's going to make them money down the road. The company is going to be investing more and more into the company's footprint, in particular in India and Taiwan. And this story comes from the Nikkei Asian Review. Foxconn they kind of saw some of these things coming. They've been relocating capacity from China since 2018. Of course, one of the biggest reasons is they want to shield their products from U.S. tariffs, right? Beyond Taiwan and India, which are getting some of these investments now and some of the investments to come, Vietnam has also been the beneficiary of Foxconn investment, where they've put in about 203 million US dollars into its footprint in Vietnam. But beyond tariff concerns, another reason why Foxconn is moving some of these operations around, in particular, some of the operations coming back to Taiwan, is due to some of its American clients and their cybersecurity concerns. So lots of movement here for a couple of big reasons. Beyond investing in its current supply chain for current products and mitigating that risk with these moves, a lot of their new investments are focused on electric vehicles, robotics, of course, and products related to smart medical devices. So interesting moves to see what Foxconn has been up to, Greg, as well as where they're going from here.
Well, I got to tell you, the government of Taiwan has to be relishing this move, because relationships between Taiwan and China have long been rocky, to say the least. China actively trying to keep Taiwan out of prominent international organizations. That battle has been going on forever. There have to be some smiling faces in Taiwan, and I have to say I'm smiling right along with them. Honestly, I personally, this is personal opinion. We're supposed to announce that, right? Personal opinion, I feel like Taiwan has been treated incredibly unfairly by the international community and largely at the hand of China. So this is a pleasing development from a lot of standpoints, but not the least of which it limits our exposure to someone we know is a hostile trade partner, not even just trade partner, right? I mean, the cybersecurity issues are not really around trade. They're around IP compromise. They're around, defense compromise. Huawei's issues are well documented. So it's been a long time coming. It's good to see. It's good for the economies of companies that have good relationships and with the United States. So it's pretty pleasing to see from my standpoint.
Yeah, and these developments are very, to your point about the relationship between mainland China and Taiwan, and these developments, especially as they get more press, certainly are not going to help some of the tensions. But Foxconn's doing what any other supply chain company leadership would be doing, and that's protecting their products, protecting their customers, protecting their shareholders, and we'll see how where it goes from here. So moving right along, Greg, in our next story, we're going to shift gears and we're going to take a deep dive into a story coming to us from the great folks over at Supply Chain Dive, right?
Yes, Matt Leonard, who also, usually we talk about Emma Cosgrove, but Matt has done some great articles. Again, by the way, this is an unpaid endorsement.
That's right.
I can't say enough about the quality of reporting and the great communication capability that you get from the folks at Supply Chain Dive. Anyway, that's enough said. And they have publications in a number of industries. But yes, let's talk about the impact that coronavirus and this seismic societal disruption that we inflicted on ourselves in response to it has had. And as you can see here in sales in April, sales plummeted 14%, right, from March, from the previous month, and 18.4% from April 19. So this is from a manufacturing and trade inventory and sales report from the U.S. Census Bureau for the month of April. And at the same time, in the inventory to sales ratio, for those of us who are actually in manufacturing or distribution or retail, we call it inventory turns or inventory turnover. the inventory turn. So I'm going to use that term going forward. The inventory turnover rate went from 1.39 in April of 2019 to 1.69 in April of 2020. Now, there is a lot of speculation on why that occurred, with sales dropping so dramatically. Again, opinion, but for it to tick up so much in such a short period of time, literally 1 month, what I believe has happened, though neither of these articles or reports say so, what I believe has happened is that while sales went down, the imports or the delivery of goods also went down due to the stoppage of commerce. And that allowed inventories to tick down just slightly 1.3%. Inventories were down 1.3%. So, the spike, I think, is largely an anomaly. It's not an indication that companies are managing their inventories that much more effectively. And certainly you wouldn't have ever seen a spike in normal conditions where sales dropped 18% and inventory turns actually went up. Just wanted to pause there for a minute so that everyone in retail, manufacturing, and distribution could chuckle a little bit, because I know they're going, yeah, of course. But John Gold, who, Scott, we interviewed in Vegas, right, at the RLA gathering event in February, which seems like a decade ago now.
Which was the premier place to be for the entire world of reverse logistics, the center of the universe, and it'll be coming up again in February.
That's right. We met some great folks who are dealing with circular economy and reverse logistics and sustainability there. But John Gold said, one of his insights was, he said it all comes down to the impact from the coronavirus. But this I found particularly interesting from Moody's. All department stores are already saddled with spring inventory purchased before the shutdown that they cannot sell through their brick and mortar stores. John Gold goes on to say that many of those goods will be shelved and offered next spring. So, and we had heard about that, right? This is something we had reported on some months ago with, I think, LVMH and some other brands shelving their goods even before they sent them to retailers, or claiming them back, or encouraging the retailers to rebox them and save them till next year. So we won't really know what color is the new black this year, because it could be saved till next year. So if orange is in fact the new black, it will be the new color for 2021. So there's a lot of concern around stale inventory and things like that, and recognize that a lot of what we're talking about is not perishable or grocery goods here, because the sales were actually trending the opposite direction. But think hard goods, hardware, soft goods, clothing, shoes, that sort of thing. A lot of those fast moving, or and sometimes just non-fast moving consumer goods, those have been heavily impacted.
That's right.
So,
hey, I want to share a couple of comments. One comment, one question from the audience here. So, Clay, if we could share a T Squared comment via YouTube. It sounds like he says shortage gaming in the making. Interesting perspective there. And then Pierre, Greg, if you're ready, Pierre's got a great question for you.
Yep.
Pierre says, hey, would the length of the global supply chain drive the short-term inventory increase as the sales drop was real time and the inventory kept coming? Any comments, sir?
Well, so actually the inventory dropped 1.3%. So I think the length of the supply chain had the impact that you're thinking of, Pierre. But consider this: a lot of the goods we're talking about came from China. So the stoppage of commerce in China was before many of the stoppage in many other countries. But yes, the length of the global supply chain did drive that short-term inventory decrease. And we're starting to see that come back, right? Because China also recovered, allegedly, from the pandemic and started shipping and producing earlier than other countries came out of lockdown. I think, Pierre, what we'll start to see as T Squared, that person gave us their name before and I can't remember it, but that T Squared was talking about, where the goods that had been held will start to be released or have been released, and they will start to show up on shores and shelves in the very near future. We've already seen recovery of the supply chain with a vengeance, the bullwhip starting to crack.
Right.
For domestic goods, and I think we will continue to see that for imported goods for sure.
Yeah, great perspective there, Greg. Great question, Pierre.
Yeah, that is a great question.
And T Square, appreciate your commentary there.
So, and I think the point to that is, by the way, just really quick, the point to that is the effect of this will be longer lasting. And we talked about this, but Scott, it seems like we talked about this ages ago too. So it's worth reiterating. The effect of this whiplash effect will be bullwhip effect. It's going to feel like whiplash because of the length of supply chains. And we'll be seeing this for some months to come. I think one other thing that's worth noting is that Moody's, the research organization Moody's, also said that margins will take a major hit as department store retailers just try to figure out how to get rid of this excessive inventory as it does continue to come in, or as it has already arrived and starts to go out of season. It's summer, by the way, in the Northern Hemisphere. So the impact is already being felt. It's frankly too late for spring goods. Jackets, although I see jackets in the few places that I shop. My fashion consultant is Costco. And they had a number of jackets, which in the South, it is way too late for. It's going to be 90 degrees Fahrenheit here today and approximately 90% humidity. So no jacket required.
That's right. Good stuff there. Moving right along from the deep dive article here today into, we're going to scan a couple of headlines here. Real quick, before we dive into this headline, just want to recognize Saneha. I may be mispronouncing your name, and I apologize. Please shoot me a note and let me know so I can get it right. But she was asking about, going back to the Foxconn story, was asking about, hey, is Foxconn going to be reducing the footprint in China as they start moving out? And that when you take capacity out of plants in one country and you add it to other plants or other facilities, you're essentially reducing your footprint. However, Stefan shared a great comment on the heels where he kind of talks to her question that, and if we can share Stefan's comment here, that Foxconn they're kind of hedging because they want to protect the infrastructure they have and protect their footprint in the Chinese market. Because look, we've said this, if we've said it once, we've said it 1,000 times, and China is not just going away. Right. They're a major player, major manufacturing player, major economy. As Greg's talked about, the advantages and some of the resources you have in China are tough to find, impossible to find, certainly here in the States. So, we're seeing, as everyone expected, some changes, some chips being moved on the proverbial table, but China's still going to be a major player.
Well,
and go ahead, Greg.
Okay, let me finish this thought real quick, though. The reality is that if you want to sell in China, you pretty much have to produce in China. They allow imports, but they heavily, as we know, they heavily tariff those imports, and they give preference to anyone doing business with a company in China. So
excellent point. And further that point is, you got to play by their rules in a way that exists in very few countries. I mean, they've got all the power, and I don't want to elaborate too much on that, but it's a different landscape that you'll find even with all the regulation we have here in the States and other countries. It's a whole different ball game in China, but they still are going to be a major player. All right, so let's dive into headline number 3, and appreciate the questions and comments there in the looks like in the LinkedIn channel on today's
also,
Buzz.
Sneha gave you a smiley face, so I think you got her name correct.
Well, that'll be a first. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. All right, and I promise you,
Well
it's
done.
not from any short of any dearth of effort. So y'all keep the feedback coming. All right, so in this third headline, we're going to be talking about, also coming to us from the great folks over at Supply Chain Dive, Jen Miller in this case. We are talking about the coming tidal wave of returns. So this is a really neat story. According to a survey conducted by Optoro, which is a dominant name in the returns and reverse logistics space, and as reported by Supply Chain Dive, consumers have been sitting on a stockpile of products that they plan to return. I can almost picture that in my mind, Greg. You're out,
What is
you're
it?
a consumer.
You can't return toilet paper.
Yeah, that's true.
That toilet paper and paper towels is what I imagine people holding.
So
Not sitting on.
Optoro conducted a poll of more than 2,000 U.S. residents in May. More than a third of those polled that participated said they're holding at least one return. My hunch is if they're holding one, there's probably several.
Yeah, at
While
least being,
stores,
yeah.
right, while stores were closed, so they're holding them because they can't walk back into these stores and get their refund that way. Nate Barrett with Episerver makes a great point in this article. The tidal wave of returns is not unique. It takes place every year anyway. It's happening at a different point in time.
Right.
Think about what takes place in January. We've had great folks from UPS come on and talk about how that, at the end of December, everybody's taking a deep breath after the holidays. A lot of their work is just starting to kick off as it comes back the other way.
Busiest shopping day of the year is December 26th.
Right.
For returns.
So it's not like retailers aren't prepared. It's just a different time, and of course the pandemic environment, which is the other big thing here. So in the months ahead, companies are going to have to handle the big returns while protecting their workforce, right? And there's a lot of challenges that go into, ensuring physical distancing and other precautions at these sites. So that is different. That's definitely a different dynamic. But as companies are going to do, they're going to lean heavily on technology. The savviest organizations are going to really use technology to quickly assess what's coming back, expedite the decision and reconciling, so that it doesn't linger on shelves and take up highly valuable warehouse space for months on end. Which some of that's going to happen in industry anyway, unfortunately. One last key point in this story. And Greg, we were talking about in recent weeks as consumer buying patterns, which many folks thought were temporary. There's more and more evidence and data that shows that's going to be longer term. That these changes in how we purchase things and why and when and what, that there's going to be some longer term ramifications, and we're seeing supply chains go ahead and make bets based on these changes. Well, as you might expect, how we return things, there's been some differences in the data thus far, and there's going to be a lot of eyes on coming back the other way, that reverse supply chain, to see if some of these preferences are short term versus we need to make some longer term adjustments. So no shortage of homework and due diligence to be done. But hey, I hope that we do see stores opening in the weeks and months ahead, because we're getting a lot of good news from how the curve remains flattened, not disappeared, as Greg likes to talk about.
Right.
But we're all looking for some good news. But Greg, weigh in on this flood of returns and how it's kind of coming in this second peak season, essentially, was what we've been seeing here in recent months.
Yeah, well, I think a great example is Kohl's, who many have probably forgotten had an agreement with Amazon to take their returns in their stores. And I just read an article recently. They're prepared. They are prepared for this huge spike in returns. Michelle Gass, their CEO, very forward thinking. They're starting to ramp up their e-commerce capabilities, which is interesting. That's an interesting take, because, by the way, they were already in the top 10 in terms of e-commerce sites to begin with. But they've also reconfigured the stores during this downtime so that taking returns from Amazon are not as cumbersome, burdensome, and also enable distancing so that they've got a segment of the store that's dedicated to that. So there are retailers that are ready for it. There are retailers that were struggling to begin with that aren't ready for it. I would argue some of these ones that have been circling the drain, Macy's, GNC just declared bankruptcy. A number of retailers are circling the drain or else have already declared bankruptcy or liquidation. Those are going to be difficult, and I would encourage you to know the status, the health of your retailer before to determine when you make those returns, because if Pier 1 is out of business, they can't take your returns.
Yeah. Yep. That's true. That is a very true point there, Greg. Love that.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
all right. So, hey, let's
yeah.
share Joseph Valentine right on time. He's got a comment here. Of course, this is his love and life. So, Clay, if you could share that comment from Joseph. All right. So Joseph Valentine writes, great point with having a return season, and that we have experienced this before, but warehouse space will be an issue. The influx of new inventory backlog and warehouses not working at max capacity may be the biggest issue. Great point, Joseph. Greg.
Not hard to tell he's related to Tom Valentine, is it? That's a great insight. Probably learned over the dinner table would be my guess. So that's a great study, Joseph. And I think also store capacity is a concern as well. The store capacity for some of these returns will be significant because companies have been continuing to fill their stores. Though I have to say, again, I was at Costco yesterday. I've never seen a Costco store as low on inventory as it was, and yet not out of stock. So this is my speculation as a retailer, a demand planning person, supply chain, inventory planning expert, is that they are keeping inventories low to maximize cash flow while demand remains relatively low.
All right. Okay. Every day is Valentine's Day. So good point there, Joseph.
Indeed.
We're going to keep on driving to Buzz headline number 4. It's going to be a little different than other stories here. We enjoy monthly collaboration with Mike Griswold over at Gartner. He's one of the gurus and easy to listen to, very practical analyst on global supply chain, especially in retail. Gartner released its 2020 Supply Chain University rankings here a few weeks back. These rankings now are evaluated. We're going to focus on the undergrad. That they did evaluate graduate programs, but for the sake of this little blurb here, we're going to focus on the undergrad side. So they ranked all these programs in 3 key areas: program scope, industry value, which includes diversity of faculty and student classes, and program size. Right? Those are 3 main criteria. I'm sure there's others, but those are the dominant areas. And we've got a new number 1. So congrats to the University of Arkansas. I think they say there in Arkansas, Woo Pig Suey, Greg. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Something like that. Yeah.
I stole that from my brother-in-law. So he's a UGA fan. But so I'm going to trust what Ramsey told me. Woo Pig Suey. Nevertheless, congrats to Arkansas, the number 1 ranked, according to Gartner, number 1 ranked supply chain undergraduate program for 2020. Now, to round out the top 10, we can't go through everything, but to round out the top 10, Rutgers, number 2, Penn State, of course, number 3, Texas, number 4, South Carolina, number 5, Tennessee, number 6, Auburn, number 7, Northeastern University, number 8, Michigan State, venerable, number 9, and of course, Georgia Tech, also venerable, coming in number 10. Here's one other cool thing. We have Morgan State University represented by T Squared on this live stream, right? A HBU. Howard University, also an HBU. This is the first year they've made the rankings. Well, guess what? They came in at 13.
Yeah.
What a splash when you're going to participate in this program for the first year. So congrats to Howard that came in at number 13 in their first year.
Well, hey, one more shout out, because my friend Colin Gresham, while not a supply chain undergrad, graduated from North Carolina A&T, also an HBCU, and they moved up pretty significantly. And I think another point to make here is that some of the stalwarts, first of all, it's hard to overestimate someone moving above Penn State as the #1 supply chain undergraduate program. That you cannot overstate that shift. And I have to tell you, I read the article about it from University of Arkansas before I saw the report, and I was stunned. I literally had to go back to Gartner and say, okay, where is everyone else in this thing? Because of course, from the University of Arkansas, they really only talked about them. Penn State falling, Tennessee, Auburn, Michigan State, and Georgia Tech all falling in the rankings,
Right.
and some new, your alma mater, University of South Carolina, moving up, Marquette, Howard, as you said, moving up,
Yep.
NCA&T, and a number of others moving up. So the field is changing, right? So that is
Yep.
significant to think about.
Agreed. Hey, T Squared corrected me because I did get something wrong here. It is HBCU, historically black college and or university. So my apologies. HBCU. That's important. All right. So I should add also, and memory says, hey, great point about taking note of the status. Let's see here. Well, I got
your retailer. Yeah.
In preparation for returns. My apologies. I thought Memory was weighing in on the supply chain programs. Memory, hope you're doing well. Let's talk about some of the key findings from this exhaustive research that Gartner puts in each of these lists. And my phone was not cooperating, so I had to adjust it here, Greg. So bear with me here. All right. So three
key fill in if you need a sec.
I'm good. 3 key trends.
Yep.
So number 1, there is a ton of curriculum expansion taking place. Now this shouldn't surprise anyone,
right?
Because just like the definition of supply chain has completely moved in the last 10 years, everything that you've got to prepare supply chain leaders for with any reputable program, it is not going to be just a couple classes. So no worry, no surprises that the curriculum is expanding. Number 2, more schools, according to the research, are really ramping up their usage of polling industry, which I love, right? To make sure they know they got a finger on the pulse of what companies are doing, what supply chain leaders doing that are out there in the real world, so to speak. So I love that. Mm-hmm. And then thirdly, which I probably love the most, programs are focusing more on diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
As a true differentiator, though, not just lip service, baking that into, and of course, Gartner's measuring. That's one of the big components as they measure the rankings here. So now, Greg, now that I think I've gotten all that out after my 18th cup of coffee, please weigh in and what else do you think this is telling us?
Well, I think it's telling us that the field is changing. I think it also tells us, and I think Barb Sexton just brought this up in the feed, it's also telling us that there are lots of ways to evaluate programs, and that's a pretty significant conflict between the U.S. News and World Report, which is widely regarded as the ranking of colleges and universities, because Arizona State is 15th on this list and 2 on the U.S. News and World Report list. At the same time, Gartner has such an incredible depth of expertise in supply chain. I will actually go take a look at U.S. News and World Report. I will, because I think that it's probably worth reconciling their methodologies there. But I tend to put a lot of faith in, and while I'm a huge Arizona State fan, by the way, I tend to put a lot of credit, a lot of credibility into anything Gartner does, because they have such an incredible research organization, and they go to painstaking depth to assure that their analysis is valid.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Well, hey, you know what? Next week we'll try. We'll see how this plays out. But we'll try to cover the U.S. News rankings. And Barb, great to have you as always. The Arizona State program undoubtedly is a fine program, one of the best. And we'll see.
We've interviewed one of their professors.
Yep.
Dr. Chaturvedi.
That's right.
And what a dynamic instructor that cat is. If you can only do it online, I would suggest you take a class from him.
Absolutely. Hey, let's recognize a few of the comments here. Memory does weigh in. I think she tuned in to the Gartner webinar that released these rankings, and she says the Gartner webinar was very informative. It was interesting to note how project management skills ranked amongst the must-have skills. That's an excellent point. Companies, certainly in supply chain, otherwise, are leaning heavily on proven project management skills to digest this change, which is only getting faster and faster. Alfredo is tuned in via LinkedIn from Tijuana, Mexico. So, Alfredo, hope this finds you well there. Appreciate you joining us on LinkedIn. Fred Tolbert says Team Supply Chain will crack top 10 soon. Now, Fred mentors the Team Supply Chain at the University of Georgia. That their supply chain management programming has gotten stronger and stronger in recent years. Let's see here. Let's say Stefan, if we could share Stefan's point there. He says, nice. I'm hoping to get a voluntary position at my local Apex chapter, hoping to further supply chain education at universities. What makes the biggest impact, do you guys think? I'll share a quick one because we're going to be at our hour that we try to target on the outset here. But really quick, it's about allowing undergraduates see how it takes place in the real world. And we're seeing a lot of schools here locally in the Metro Atlanta area, from Georgia Tech to UGA to Kennesaw State to Clayton State. We're seeing them bring in a lot of supply chain leaders and having them speak to, or better yet, we're seeing them take students out on plant tours. The UGA program took a big team out to the local Caterpillar plant on a tour I was part of. I don't know, it's been a little while, but that real world immersion is so important. It really marries well with teaching them the best practices and the curriculum and the core skills you've got to learn, but marrying that with the outside influence. Greg, what would be your one big impact?
Well, I think getting involved with the students is really important. As I think about Stefan, I feel like we know him now, right? We know that he lost his negotiation for dog versus cat with his wife. Prudent to do that also, by the way. But I think the impact, and we've seen it with Latia Thomas and our own intern, Genoa, and at Morgan State. The thing where the place where you can have the most impact, Fred Tolbert does it at the University of Georgia as well, is to get engaged with the students. So if an Apex chapter, then I would suggest find one at a university nearby and get engaged with that somehow and help those students learn what you know or what you hope to learn. Learn it together.
Yep. Great point. I want to share T Squared's first comment there on YouTube. He says the industry is getting more notice at the undergrad level. He got bit by the bug at the grad level. So thanks for sharing that. That's a great comment, because I think until we've seen the proliferation of the supply chain programs at two-year schools, at four-year schools, at the undergrad level, I think a lot of folks were getting finding out about how they can obtain supply chain credentials after they've already been out in the workforce. So that's a great point, and I love to see these undergrad programs get stronger and stronger. And then Claudia also shares on LinkedIn here.
Thank goodness.
Claudia, hope this finds you well. Wonderful episode a few weeks back. Claudia says the proof of any of these programs is in the employment rate of their graduates. It used to be graduation rate, but now it should be gainful employment. Well said.
Yep.
Well said. I love that. All right, so we got to wrap up this segment, Greg. We're going to kind of move into wrap-up mode here. You and I both enjoyed the SAP Sapphire Now programming that wrapped up about a week and some change ago. I love how they had an artist come in and for each of the different practices, so to speak, each different channels for us, we focus most of our time on the procurement channel. And this artist, this clearly very talented artist, kind of put together a collage of some of the key points made. Now, I love this, but I think it's missing one key point made, Greg, that I really love that Chris Hayden shared. Do you know which one that would be?
You want me to say it, or do you want me to just say yes? Smashing the silos.
Right.
Right.
Look,
Yes,
We
it should have
know.
a big old sledgehammer smashing silos. You're
Yes.
absolutely right.
I love that for a variety of reasons. We all know silos and that kind of that principle or that vehicle for conveying how you've got islands of excellence, or in some cases islands of lack of excellence, and how folks don't talk to each other, don't communicate at management and leadership levels and otherwise. But I believe in this day and age, there is that smashing silos goes much further than just supply chain, and it is about, it's not just unique to supply chain. It goes to business, the greater business
Yes.
world, and how we've got to bring people together, get them talking about uncomfortable things, and it's going to further the industry. It's going to further our ability to lead, navigate through some change, supply chain related, or otherwise.
When you talk
So,
about things, they cease to be uncomfortable
mm,
because you come to a common understanding, right? You come to an understanding of this is what supply chain needs from merchandising and vice versa. So, or pick a department, pick an organization, pick a group of peoples. If you discuss it and you come to a common understanding, then it ceases to be, it just becomes a conversation and it becomes very, very productive.
yep. And Stefan, you're right. It is surprisingly difficult to smash silo any means, whether you're talking about, in a manufacturing plant, when you want to really act on effective S&OP planning. So you're trying to bring the sales team together with the production team, or if you're talking about in other different areas, and especially in the broader sense. But it's got to be done. It's got to be done, especially for enterprise success, and for that matter, just for us to address some of the issues of the day. Okay, so the good news is all the procurement channel via Sapphire now, all the replays of the keynotes and discussions are available. I believe, Clay, we've included that link in the show notes of today's Buzz, so you can check out that programming for yourself. Hey, Greg, before we move on to our next event that we're going to share with folks, any last words about SAP Sapphire Now?
It was an incredible amount of free learning, right, from some of the best companies in the world. Porsche and is the one that comes top of mind to me. Of course, I'm a car guy, but there was a tremendous amount of learning there, and I just think it was a big step. Let's put it this way: it was a big step for a company like SAP to take an event from which they made enormous revenue last year and completely flip it on its head and then give it away. That was a huge step. And we're seeing that over and over again. It started with AIAG, the Automotive Industry Action Group, right after Modex. And we're seeing companies finally get the value of what it is we do, sharing community information, sharing community education to the community for free, right? And I think that's a really powerful awakening, and I think it will increase the rapidity with which silos are smashed and supply chain grows.
Love that. I couldn't say it any better. I appreciate you sharing, Greg, and appreciate all the comments there. Okay, so speaking of smashing silos and speaking of talking about subjects that can be uncomfortable, but we've got to talk about them, we invite each of you to join us for a special event on July 15th, where we're simply trying to help facilitate a discussion and conversations and really just continue the dialogue, right? We're not going to solve all the world's ills in a 90-second webinar, and trust me, that's not lost on us. However, if we don't continue to work to try to just help learnings and frank conversation take place, then we're not doing enough to help us tackle and digest some of the changes that got to take place. So July 15th, we've got an outstanding panel with Tandria, David, and DC. And also we have our audience. And just like in today's Buzz, Greg, our audience is going to bring their perspective, their questions, their experiences, their insights. This whole stand up and sound off platform is built for that, right? We want you to be the voice and for you to lead the discussion. Greg and I are going to be there just to kind of keep it between the posts and keep things moving and help facilitate it, right? Questions and answer and whatnot. But please join us July 15th. We're very pleased also to be sponsored. This session be sponsored by our friends over at Source Connect. And that has allowed us, Greg, I think we can let the cat out of the bag. Why don't you do it?
Sure. Well, Source Connect has given us some sponsorship dollars, and we decided we would pass that on to the Apex chapter at Morgan State University, where Genoa, again, one of our interns, and Latia, one of our favorite guests of all time, hashtag hire Latia, and you better do it fast because somebody's going to pick her up. But anyway, some funds that allows them to facilitate and I think increase some of their programs. I can only guess by how happy Genoa was when we finally told her, after we told her father first, that it must be something that is really groundbreaking for them in terms of being able to facilitate some programs there.
Yeah. And no, our thrust here, especially with this vehicle, is the dialogue. So given that there was interest in sponsorship, like Greg said, for us as a pass through, hey, what can we do with this? Because this isn't what we're after with this July 15th event. So to be able to, invest it in a great program, a great university, and great people that are all highly interested in supply chain, that's a great win-win. So, all right. So, join us. It's all about the discussion and the dialogue and the sharing of views and experiences. July 15th, you can go to supplychainnowradio.com to sign up. And if you have any questions about that, shoot us a note. We're really looking forward. I mean, frankly, very selfishly, I'm looking forward to learning and hearing folks weigh in on the subject of race and industry that I bet I haven't heard some of our regular participants weigh in yet on. So selfishly, I'm looking forward to the lesson learned. All right, so Greg, we are going to wrap up with a URL that we're only going to have for a little bit longer, right?
Are you going to let that cat out of the bag? Go for it, man. Come on.
So for any of our folks that have been following along with us for years, Supply Chain Now Radio was our name we've had since the beginning, and then we've been rebranding in the last year as radio. Hey, not throwing any stones. I love sports talk radio, but the word itself can be very kind of rear view mirror-ish, if that's a word.
It is
here,
now.
That's right. It is now. So we're in the process of moving everything over to a new URL, new brand. Excited about the growth and excited about where we go from here. But in the meantime, for any of our podcasts, any of our webinars, any of our blogs, you name it, anything we talked about here today, you can find at supplychainnowradio.com. And if you can't find it, shoot Amanda a note at amanda@supplychainnowradio.com, and we're here to serve as a resource for you. So, Greg, last word before I wrap up.
Well, it's funny because we thought we might only have like 40 minutes of content, right? And I'd like to point out to everyone who's watching, Scott has sacrificed beach time to be here with us, and has tortured himself by looking out the plate glass door right in front of him at the ocean the entire time. So, Scott, thank you, by the way, for doing this on vacation time. We're going to try and take a little bit of downtime this week. We've still got episodes that we're going to publish this week, but this should be the only time you hear us live this week, which many people might consider a blessing. So first of all, enjoy your vacation. Really do get some downtime. You deserve it. You've earned it. All these people know it. I know it. Everyone at Supply Chain Now knows it, and we want you to have it. And look, thanks for everyone for showing up, for supporting us, for continuing to ask great questions, offer great insights, and allowing us to share our thoughts, some news, and our opinions with you. And look, we'll see you next week.
Supply Chain. That's right. And Greg, well put. We're very grateful. It's all about the audience. It's all about the value y'all bring to the table, what you're after, what content you're after. So I couldn't say that better, as usual, Greg. But in the meantime, the challenge remains the same, and it's us challenging ourselves with this as much as our audience. Hey, do good, give forward, but be the change that needs to take place. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
We're out.